watching this at a later date, not during the live stream, we find ourselves in a bit of a confusing situation. This is a situation where you're trying to figure out what this is, and I'm trying to wait for people to funnel in. So alas, as we talk with each other here while we wait for some folks to show up, let me tell you a little bit about what we are. Okay? This is Money Shift in the Morning. What Money Shift in the Morning is a daily morning show on every day except Tuesday and except Sunday. So, if you guys want to get your morning car news, don't forget to follow Money Shift. And we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, we're on Twitch, wherever you can find a live stream except for OnlyFans, that's where I am. So we tend to cover daily news. So whatever, I'm sorry, there's a portion where I listen to myself and it like really trips me out. Okay. So we tend to cover everything that came out in the previous day. However, there are some days where there's just no car news. So on days like that, we cover topics. So a couple of the topics that we have coming up are the new Golf R versus its competition, and the new TLX Type S versus its competition. Shout out to Matt for sharing the stream. Thank you for that, and appreciate it, definitely. So we got a good one today. If you're looking to my right, you can see the highlights. Today we're going to be talking about the new TLX Type S. Some pricing was revealed on that car, and I want to talk about how you guys feel about it in comparison to some of the other cars. We're going to be talking about a minivan today. I know that's not what everyone freaks out over, but I think this thing is cool as shit, and maybe this is just insight into the fact that I have an extremely eclectic and weird car taste. But we're also going to be talking about some new vehicles from Peugeot. So we got a really quick one, but we got a good one as well. There's a lot of good cars that we're going to be talking about. But before we get into the main news, I want to touch on something minor that I thought was absolutely hilarious that debuted yesterday as well. This is a Chevy Blazer, and if you guys don't know what this is, I don't really blame you. But effectively what the Chevrolet Blazer was a midsize SUV that Chevrolet brought back. It's a unibody. It's not body on frame like the old Blazer. It's powered by a 3.6-liter V6 that in stock form makes 308 horsepower and 270 pound-feet of torque. So pretty substantial from the factory. I think the Blazer looks pretty good. It's definitely like a Camaro SUV. Right, that's what Chevrolet was going for with the new Blazer. But Lingenfelter came along. Lingenfelter. Say that 1,000 times and see what happens. But Lingenfelter came along. Good morning, Alexandre. How we doing? Shout out to Ben and Alex with the likes on the stream. Thank you, fellas. Appreciate that. Lingenfelter came along and was like, hey, 308 horsepower? Not enough. Not enough. So what are we going to do? We're going to take it up a notch. And they put their supercharger kit on it, which they offer, which is this guy right here, okay? It's an Edelbrock TVS 1740 supercharger, and complete with an intercooler, it makes 431 horsepower and 378 pound-feet of torque. Not bad. Not bad. So you're talking about, for the price of $7,000 installed or $5,000 if you want to do it yourself, you can have a 431 horsepower, 378 torque SUV that no one will even know about because there's no performance version of the Blazer. Lingenfelter also has suspension, brake, and exhaust upgrades if you want to get even more serious. But if you don't, and you just want something that looks like a regular Blazer on the outside, but has some power, you can do that. So I wanted to touch on that because I thought it was hilarious. Anything that makes over 400 horsepower probably doesn't need it, but, you know, it's interesting nonetheless. All right, so let's get into this week's actual news. So I know we've talked about how Peugeot... Oh, good question, Alexandre. How much is the Blazer itself? So we can actually do this live. Let me share this with you guys so we can see what we can get a Blazer for. Hold on one second. Because we could actually build one of these right now. Okay, here we go. So we're on cars.com. Let's see. Chevrolet Blazer. Beautiful. Beautiful. All right. So we're going to go sort by, and we're going to do price lowest. Brilliant. And we're going to make sure we have the 6-cylinder ticked off. Brilliant. Okay. So you can get into a Blazer with 38,000 miles for $26,000. If you're comfortable with one with higher mileage, you can go $24,000. And now you're talking about you add $5,000 to this, so 31 grand in the case of this Blazer, and you have 400 horsepower. 431 horsepower. Not bad, right? Not bad at all. I don't know. I think that makes sense to me. Uh-oh. We got Matt coming in with the 1,000-star drop. Matt letting everyone know that he's the father of this stream. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate that, as always, for sure. But let's talk about some Peugeot news, guys. Let's talk about some Peugeot news. And I know we talked about recently that Peugeot is not coming to the U.S. because Stellantis said that they're going to be focusing their efforts on Alfa Romeo, Chrysler, Dodge, Ram, and other products. So why am I showing you the new Peugeot 308? Well, the reason why I'm showing you the Peugeot 308 is that this car was actually developed with the U.S. in mind. This was going to be a vehicle that was going to be part of the rollout to the United States. So what that means is that it complies with all the safety regulations, all the EPA regulations, everything like that. And it could come to the U.S. So decent numbers, but still an ugly vehicle. I hear you, Matt. The Blazer definitely isn't easy on the eyes, but the fact that you can have something around $30,000 that has 431 horsepower that no one would know about, pretty appealing. That's what I showed you guys. Alexandre says, the new 308 is amazing. Yes, I love my Peugeots. I think it's a nice sleeper. Yeah, the Blazer definitely is a nice sleeper. So the 308 could come to the United States under the guise of a different brand. We could be looking at what Dodge could resurrect the Caliber or Neon name with, what Alfa Romeo could bring a small subcompact in, what Chrysler could call the PT Cruiser. So that's why I'm showing you guys this car today. So this could come to the U.S. with a Dodge badge. It could come to the U.S. with a Chrysler badge. It could come to the U.S. with an Alfa badge, etc. Right? There's plenty of avenues for this car to come to the States, and because it was developed with the United States in mind, it already meets all the compliance issues to bring this car here. Okay, so let's talk about what this Peugeot 308 is. Well, first and foremost, it's a Volkswagen Golf Challenger, so that should put the size of this hatchback into perspective, as well as the price, right? They meant to go against the Golf with this car, so this isn't going to be like a $45,000 US plus machine. We're talking mid to high 20s, low to high 30s, depending on trim level, okay? It's the third generation of the EMP2 platform. It is a bigger wheelbase, lower height to the previous generation Peugeot 308, which gives it that overall more aggressive look. This thing is a really sharp looking hatchback. I'm a big fan of this design. On the inside, you have Peugeot's iCockpit. So that's this sort of setup here. I love it, where you have the instrument cluster a little bit raised and you have the infotainment a little bit raised. It just really looks like a fighter jet on the inside, and it is unlike anything else on the market. And if I'm going to be honest, that's probably going to be the hardest thing that if an existing brand in the USA takes on a Peugeot 308, they would have to convince people that this isn't just a rebrand, it's ours, right? But you could, us marketing folk, we're good at that kind of shit, right? So it has a 10-inch instrument cluster that on top trims actually has a 3D feature, which is really rad. It has a 10-inch infotainment screen, and it has all the driver aids under the sun. You're talking about stop and go adaptive cruise. You're talking about lane keep assist. This thing can change lanes for you if you would like it. It can adapt its speed for curves. It has all the cameras under the sun. You're talking about 360 view, 180 view, 90-degree view, 45, whatever you want. It'll show you yourself for no, it won't. It won't do that. Sorry. It has a heated windshield, heated steering wheel, all that, right? So this thing is definitely loaded to the gills and ready to go. But what is powering it? John Raftery says, Matt Gamont, only if they eventually stuff a Hellcat V8 in it. Yeah, could you imagine Dodge brings this and they're like, hold on. You mean to tell me we have another vehicle we can put our V8 in that we haven't already? What's that? It's a front-wheel drive sedan that wasn't developed for a V8. Oh, what's that? Have they met us? Yeah, I mean, yeah, but this is a Peugeot, right? This wasn't a Dodge. It's not meant for your V8. Hey, you pipe down. We'll do what we want. That's what I want to see. Could you imagine this comes back as a Caliber SRT4? Or they call it a Caliber SRT8 and just drop a Hellcat in it. Won't happen, but won't happen. Matt says it would run like shit, but I'd drive it. Yeah, for sure. Could you? Yeah. Oh my God. Remember the days? This is like early 2000s where Chevrolet released like multiple V8 front wheel drive things. We're talking about like the Impala Coupe. You know what I mean? Like the Impala itself, the SS, all these things that just had transverse V8s. They could do that here as well. They could. Damn, that just threw me off pretty big time. Alexander says, I drove the 208 with the iCockpit. It's actually two 3D screens in one another. Mega stuff. Yeah, that seems really, really cool. I definitely, I have a couple of European trips coming up, and I'm definitely looking forward to renting Peugeots, Renaults only, because when I'm out of the States, I try to rent something that's not available. So the last time I was in Greece, oh my God, here's a quick story for everyone. Do you have a second? When I was in Greece the last time with my girlfriend, we get to the front desk, okay? Sixt Rent-A-Car, which, by the way, amazing service. This guy goes to me. He goes, hey, all in Greek, right? Are you getting married? Are you going to get married on this trip? Is this what your trip is for, to get married? And I was like, no, like, I'm looking at Patricia. I think we'd been together for a couple of years at that point, whatever. I look back at the guy. I was like, no, that's not our intention. In Greek, right? Responding in Greek. The whole conversation's in Greek. And he goes, oh, that's a shame. Because I see you rented a Renault Clio, but we have one BMW left. And I would have given it to you if you guys were getting married on this trip. And I was like, oh, hold on one second. Let me just check my phone. Wait, yeah. We actually, that's crazy. And I don't know what happened here, but we actually are getting married. Wait, that's great. How did that happen? We are getting married. And he goes, oh, that's great. That's super good to hear. He goes, I'll just sign it over to you guys. So we got a BMW 1 Series. I'm trying to pull up a photo right now. We got the 1 Series hatch for the price of a Renault Clio rental during our stay in Greece, and it was terrific. But I wouldn't have rented a BMW because we can get BMWs in the States, except we can't get this BMW in the States, right? We weren't offered the 1 Series hatch, so that was definitely a highlight. That was pretty funny. Okay, so let's talk about engines for the Peugeot 308. This car comes in 3 different configurations. You can get this in gas form, you can get this in diesel form, or you can get this in plug-in hybrid form. Now, if you ask me what would come to the U.S., if anything could come to the U.S., it would probably be the 2 plug-in hybrids that are going to be available for this car. Matt says, bro, I'd marry you for a BMW upgrade on vacation. Yeah, it was a no-brainer. No-brainer, right? The Renault Clio is a good machine, don't get me wrong. It's not like we were going from a fucking base Kia to a fully loaded BMW. Like, we were going to something that was like not, it wasn't a crazy jump, but it was an upgrade. So, we're getting married for sure. We're getting married for sure. So the 2 plug-in hybrid versions of this car are likely the ones that would make it to the U.S. With a big concern for things like EPA, they could help out whatever lineup they come to, right? Because if you remember, a lot of the automotive companies have an aggregate MPG that they're working towards, right? And while they don't have to do it anymore because the last presidency took that restriction off, a lot of the companies are still working to that goal as a show of good faith. So something that the 2 plug-in hybrid models could do to a lineup like Dodge, to a lineup like Alfa Romeo that don't have any of that right now, is they could sort of bring that average up a little bit. right? So the two plug-in hybrid models, one of them is a 150 horsepower engine, the other is a 180. Both of them are assisted by an 81 kilowatt hour electric motor. Both of them have around 35 to 37 miles of electric vehicle range. So pretty substantial, right? Like very Prius Prime-like figures in terms of EV range. They didn't disclose what their MPG was outside of the pure EV range, but it's probably going to be pretty good, right? This is a modern hybrid, so we're not expecting anything under 40 here. And when you get 180 horsepower, it should be a relatively, nimble, fun car to drive. A big drag about the Peugeot 308 is that a GTI model is likely not coming. So if this car came to the US, it would be very Mazda 3-esque in the sense that we always want a performance model that we're not going to get, and we just have to be happy that there's a 180 horsepower model that has 81 kilowatt hour electric motor assistance, right? The gas engine is a 1.2 liter, so it's not like we'd be missing out on anything there. And the diesel engine is a 1.5. And as much as I love diesel, the entire United States does not for vehicles. So here we are. We'd like to get the plug-in hybrids. I think the design is beautiful. I think the interior is like nothing I've seen, even though it's been Peugeot commonplace for a very long time. It would be new and fresh to the US. We've talked in the past about how Peugeot could bring in a full lineup of vehicles for someone like Chrysler, and it would refresh that whole lineup. So there's no way that Stellantis hasn't thought about this. Let's hope that they could potentially go through with it, because this could be an easy way for the brand to save some funds, but also for a brand like Chrysler to get new models, right? If they bring this back as like a PT Cruiser, or they call it the Chrysler Neon, which it operated with for a little bit, that'd be some name recognition. And then they have some other names in the bag that they could use for SUVs and other vehicles, right? So we'll see what happens, but I definitely wanted to show you guys that car because it is a new vehicle that came out in the Stellantis landscape. Alexandra says, from what I know and am aware, we should not expect any more high-performance variants from the PSA Group brands. That's true, but they do have the PSE car that comes in I think it's the 508, that leverages the same hybrid system that is in the hypercar, the Le Mans hypercar. So they do have like one or two performance models left, but in terms of new ones, yeah, there's definitely not going to be any more coming down the pipeline. So moving on to probably the car that I'm most excited to talk about. And we have two left, and I know you guys are probably like, Thanasi, like all we give a shit about is the Acura Tlx Type S out of these two cars. Like, why are you showing me a minivan? Who actually cares about a minivan? I'll tell you who cares about a minivan. Me. And because I care, you care. And because you care, we care. So because we care, we're going to be talking about a minivan for a little bit. And I hope that's okay. All right. All right, now that we got that out of the way, what are you guys looking at? You are looking at the Hyundai Staria. Excellent name. Excellent name. You're looking at the new people mover from the South Korean brand. This thing can carry 7 people. It can carry 9 people. Or in top spec trim, you're talking about 11 people can fit in this fucking thing. Okay. This car was actually designed from the inside out, meaning that they designed the inside first fully before they even touched the outside. Love that. But that's also why, like John notes, it's a little bit ugly. It's a little ugly. I love it, because I think this thing slammed to the ground on some big-ass wheels would look fucking awesome. That thing dumped on some rims. Whew. Designed from the inside out, that's apparent. Alexandra says it's actually a cool minivan, one you wouldn't be ashamed to be seen or driving in. I'm going to be frank, guys. I wouldn't be ashamed driving in any minivan, quite frankly. But anyway, the front end of this car includes an LED light that runs end to end, and then this car features the Hyundai sort of signature where the low beams and the high beams are in the pods, kind of like the Kona, kind of like the Juke, right? Inside, it was inspired by the lounge of a cruise ship. There's a 10.25 infotainment with a button-style shifter. In 7-seat configuration, there's a one-touch relaxation mode that reclines the seat, gives you the ambient lighting in the back. Exactly what you want. In 9-seat mode, the seats can swivel 180 degrees to face the third row, or in 11-seat mode, they do nothing because now you're seating 11 people, so you got to maximize all your space. Let's be real. But look at this thing. This thing doesn't have 2 rows. This thing doesn't have 3 rows. This thing has 4 rows. And it doesn't look like an Econoline van or a GMC Savannah, right? I think that's the key here when you're thinking about this car. Shout out to Ibrahim with the like. Shout out to Kurt with the share. Thank you guys for tuning in this morning. Appreciate it for sure. So it doesn't look like an Econoline van. It doesn't look like a GMC Savannah, a GMC or a Chevrolet Express, or a Volkswagen whatever, a Mercedes Sprinter van. It looks very unique, and I love that. I love the design of this thing. I think it looks killer. And like I said, bagged on ordnance, this thing would be perfection. Guys, it's Money Shift in the morning. Of course, we have a shot of espresso. Come on. Come on now. John says, I'm getting Sprinter vibes, though. Well, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, this is a people carrier, right? So it's going to have that similar silhouette, but I think they differentiated it enough in the front, in the rear, where even though this looks very Transit Sprinter, the front is sloped enough and rounded off enough, and the rear is unique with the Escalade style top to bottom tails, that it does look, you know, a little bit individual. And in top trim, you get these nice LEDs. All right. I'm going to move on off my minivan soapbox, but I guess I wanted to make you guys aware of this thing because I think it's cool as shit, and I hope someone modifies one of these. All right. Let's talk about Acura for a second. We're going to have an entire episode in the future, maybe even this week, could be tomorrow, about the TLX Type S and its competition. But before we do, Acura did release some of the final details about the TLX Type S that you guys need to know about in order to be fully prepared to talk about this car, not only with yourself, if you want one of these, but to understand what it potentially competes against, because that's pretty crucial to understanding whether this is a car you would consider. Okay. Before we talk about pricing, let's talk about details. So this is a 3-liter turbo V6, okay? First car that's going to be using this engine. It has 355 horsepower, 354 pound-feet of torque. Super handling all-wheel drive with torque vectoring. It has a 10-speed automatic that was sport-tuned, which is huge. But anyway, double wishbone front suspension, multi-link rear suspension, adaptive dampers, Brembo brakes. You're talking about a pretty aggressive bit of kit here, okay? The price range, $50,000. $50,000, low 50s is what Acura said. Of course, they won't give us a spot-on figure, but we'll say it costs like 52, right? Low 50s, that's 52. So how does that stack up in terms of the competition? Well, for those of you that follow MoneyShift on Facebook and Instagram, cheers to you, you'll already know because you've read the post. But for those of you that don't, it's okay. Just hit the like button on the stream. We'll be fine. We're still friends, okay? The CT5V, which is Cadillac's competitor to this, starts at $50,395. The M340i starts at $54,700. The C43 starts at $56,000. The S4 starts at $50,000. So Acura with this car certainly is not the cost leader. But have they done enough to convince you to purchase one of these over those? I think that's the big question here, right? Because Acura has made a big emphasis on performance. In fact, if I just search Acura performance brand into the Google machine, I get a quote from Acura saying that they want to reestablish itself as a performance brand before working on EVs. The quote was, "We needed to kind of refocus and reestablish ourselves as a performance brand. We want everybody to understand where we're at and what we're about first." So Acura with this car is trying to set the tone for the entire brand with something like this. John brings up a great question. What are the power levels of the other models? Let's get into that right now because I have those figures and I can share them with you. Okay, so in the case of the BMW M340i, that again starts like what we'll say is like $4,000 to $5,000 more expensive. That leverages a 3-liter turbo inline six that makes 382 horsepower. So we're talking about something that makes 30 more horsepower than this car. Still manages to get 32 mpg, but who cares about mpg when you're talking about performance cars? But anyway, it's most certainly going to be a faster machine than the TLX, unless the TLX is severely underrated. But we all know that the M340i is also underrated from the factory. BMW tends to underrate their models, which is evident by the fact that I believe they just dyno tested an M4 to get like 570 horsepower instead of whatever the hell BMW claims from the factory. Okay, anyway, Mercedes with the C43, that again starts at $56,000, which is probably going to be $4,000 to $5,000 more expensive than the TLX Type S, also has 385 horsepower. So it's 3 more than the M340i. But again, it's probably going to be about $4,000 more expensive than this TLX Type S. Now, when we get over to Audi, where we're talking about a car that'll probably come in a little less than the TLX Type S, we got the S4. Yeah, the S4 starts at $49,900, so it probably gets a touch over 50,000 when it gets shipped. So the engine of this car, oh my God, why is the Audi website the hardest one to use out of all of them? Here we go. 349 horsepower, 369 pound-feet of torque. So it has less horsepower, but more torque than the TLX, but pretty comparable, right? Roughly around. And then the last one that we'll check is the fine folks over at Cadillac and the CT5V, which does have an advantage over the TLX and over all the other cars except for the M340 in that you can get it in rear-wheel drive, right? The only other car that I've listed that you can get in rear-wheel drive is the M340, which is also available in all-wheel drive. Every other car that we talked about is permanently all-wheel drive, right? Including the C43. All right. So the CT5V has a 3-liter twin-turbo V6 as well, which is interesting. And it makes 360 horsepower and 405 pound-feet of torque. So it makes more horsepower and about 50 more pound-feet of torque than the TLX Type S. It also has magnetic ride control. It also has an electronic limited slip differential. So I guess what we're talking about here is that from a stat sheet perspective, okay, the Acura TLX Type S does not stand out. It doesn't do anything unique. It doesn't make you salivate. It doesn't make you go, this is something I have to have in comparison to the competition. John says it right. He says it's comparable, but it's on the lower end. It's probably 1-to-1 with cars like the S4, which is right around where it's priced, right? But it definitely is lower than cars like the M340i and the C43 AMG, no doubt. But yeah, John, you nail it right there with the it better handle amazing. It has a couple things in its favor as well, right? We're talking about double wishbone front suspension, multi-link rear suspension. We're talking about it also has adaptive dampers, right? So these are all things that should be in the driving feel portion, something that we can't measure on a stat sheet, in favor for this car. But you know what the biggest factor is going to be to this car's success in terms of whether it's good or not? The biggest thing, the single biggest thing that Acura has to make sure they get right with this car in order to be considered a competitor in this segment. Anybody? Come on, guys. I know you know what the biggest thing is here. What does Acura absolutely have to nail in this TLX Type S in order to be considered a competitor in this segment? All right, enough time has passed. The transmission. If that sport-tuned 10-speed automatic transmission is slow to upshift, slow to downshift, hesitates, shout out to Muzamil with the follow. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Welcome to the stream. If that 10-speed auto is slow, is laggy, Acura's in big trouble. Big trouble. Because it doesn't matter then how the car handles if the transmission is slow to respond. Right? I mean, think about a car like the Jaguar XE. Right? When the Jaguar XE launched, it still has a superior suspension setup than the 3 Series. It handled better. It drove better. But that car's letdown was the infotainment. This car has the intangibles with infotainment, has the looks. I think it looks incredible. John says it as well. I think it's one of the better looking cars in the bracket, which is a huge plus. I love the front. I don't know what the hate is for. I agree. I don't know what the hate is for the looks in general. I think it's very aggressive. I think it's beautiful. I think it's individual. And in a world where grills and fake vents are taking over, Acura has done a really great job to minimize that and create a car that gives off a performance ethos regardless of what trim you get. Okay. So, yeah, see how instead of making fake vents in the back, they just made that a reflector? Brilliant. Brilliant. But if the transmission is not up to par, Acura is going to be in big trouble with this car. There's a lot hinging on the tune of that transmission. And if they can't get it as good as a ZF, and if they can't get it as good as even like a Sonata N-Line 8-speed dual clutch, we're in trouble. We're in trouble. Because Acura actually did develop a dual clutch transmission. If you guys looked at the last generation TLX in 4-cylinder form, you could get it in a dual clutch transmission that also had a torque converter, which was interesting. But the reason why Acura did it was so that when you slowed down to a stop or when you rolled, it didn't give you that lurchiness that DSGs or dual clutch transmissions can give you. Excuse me. That's what happens when you chug espresso. Oh, that's what happens when you chug espresso, everybody. So Acura actually has developed a really, really cool transmission, a dual clutch transmission. Shout out to Andrew for tuning in. Appreciate it. Yeah, he brings up a good question right out of the gate. This or the CT5V? And I got to be honest with you, I would like looking at these cars purely based on a stat sheet. And looking at these cars, assuming that the transmission is good. If this 10-speed auto is up to par and can come to play, I would take this over the CT5V. If it's not, I take the CT5V and I don't look back. Because it's available in rear-wheel drive, because it has the magnetic ride, because it has a solid transmission, right? Similar power figures, etc. But yeah, John, exactly. If it isn't up to ZF standards, then it very well could be a flop. Or God forbid they give us a trans like the OTLs. No Blackwing, no care. Yeah, I hear you. And that's the truth, right? This car could be chalked regardless of the engine's ability, regardless of the suspension, or regardless of the steering, regardless of the interior, if that transmission is shit. It could very easily go like haywire. I mean, it's been the sole reason why multiple cars have flopped. So when Acura says they've sport-tuned this TLX transmission, I got my fingers crossed. And I really hope that that means that they've actually paid attention and that they've actually benchmarked it against that Mercedes, against that Audi, against that BMW, because those, without a doubt, are the top 3 transmissions in this bracket, right? Whether it's the ZF with the BMW tune, whether it's the Steptronic, I think is what Mercedes calls it, or whether it's the, or what does Audi call it? They don't call it, it's not DSG, it's some fucking Audi proprietary bullshit, but you know what I'm talking about, right? Those are the 3. And if Acura didn't benchmark it against those 3 and instead they benchmarked it against their low old car or against a Lexus or something like that, we're in trouble. We're in big trouble. But I am really excited for this car. Sportronic. Thank you, John. I am really excited for this car. I think it is a good design. I think Acura's refocus and attempt to reestablish themselves as a performance brand is really exciting, because we get cars like this. We get cars like the MDX that has a double wishbone multi-link suspension setup as well. We're going to get cars in the future like a new sports sedan that's potentially an Integra, who knows, but more sporty vehicles before Acura starts to shift focus to electric, right? So that means that the glory days of the ICE will live a little bit longer, and I live for that. I'm really, 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 really excited. Shout out to Mike Hogu with the follow. Thank you for that. Thank you for tuning in. Sorry, S-Tronic, stupid ass name. Good transmission though. Yeah, exactly. It's horrendous, but it's a fantastic transmission. So Acura has enough machines that they can benchmark this car against, that if it isn't at least up to snuff, they're fucked. And you don't even have to do it against a new one. They could have grabbed a 2-year-old S4, a 2-year-old 3 Series, a 2-year-old AMG, a 2-year-old whatever, and they could still have the makings of a good car. Yeah, if they bring back the Integra, sign me up too. But I will say that Acura has unveiled in their conceptual roadmap for what the future is going to be, that they're coming out with a new sport sedan, like a smaller thing. So if they bring back that Integra moniker, which I doubt they will because they're very much in this like TLX, MDX, RLX like world, it'll be a sedan only. So it'll probably be like the reintroduction of the ILX, which I'm fine with because the ILX conceptually was a good machine, right? Thank you, Musanda, for the follow. Appreciate that. Thank you. But yeah, guys, this is just a preview of what MoneyShift in the morning is. Again, we stream every day from around the 7 to 8:30 a.m. timeline is when we start, and we usually end around the 9 to 9:30 range. So thank you guys for tuning in. This is where you can get all your daily car news. This is where you can have the car conversation that you crave every day and I live for. So thank you guys for tuning in. Appreciate all the likes. And if you haven't followed already, slam that follow button. It helps the stream grow as we have been, and I appreciate you guys for that. And if you got a friend that likes cars and you got a friend that tunes in the morning, bring them in. Let's talk machines. Okay. Tomorrow's episode, if we don't have any huge car news, we're likely going to be talking about the Golf R and the TLX and their competition in greater detail, and which car you should buy, which car you shouldn't, or we can go crazy and just talk about the worst cars that are available on the market today. I'm unsure. Those are the topics that are sort of in the back of my mind, and we'll see what happens. But if you guys have any other topics that you would love for the Money Shift in the Morning show to cover, feel free to DM me on the Money Shift Facebook page or Money Shift Instagram page or Twitch, whatever you're most comfortable with. I'm on all those platforms constantly, so I'll definitely respond. And if it makes sense, we'll work it into an episode as soon as we can. Like we touched on in the beginning of the stream, if there isn't any car news, we'll be covering topics. So we've talked about purchasing a car and how best you can go about buying a car to get the best deal. We've talked about the best vehicles you can get under $10,000 that maybe you haven't considered, the best vehicles under $20,000 that you can get that maybe you haven't considered. And we'll continue to do concepts and topics like that if there isn't any car news. So without further ado, thank you everybody for joining Money Shift in the Morning. I am Thanasi. I will see you guys tomorrow.